The world today is louder than ever. The noise of work, social media, endless demands to succeed, to be happy, to prove you are better than others. In this storm of chaos, a paradox emerges. The louder the world becomes, the more powerful silence is. A person who says nothing, who does not try to compete, who does not rush to prove themselves, often captures everyone's attention. Silence in the middle of noise is not emptiness. It is like a mountain standing firm, needing no voice yet impossible to ignore. Society has long carried a prejudice. Those who remain silent are often seen as weak, as unable to face reality, as lacking the arguments to defend themselves. Strength is usually associated with those who speak the most, argue the fastest, and react the quickest. If you don't respond immediately, you risk being dismissed. But the truth is the opposite. Those who know how to choose silence are often the ones who hold real power within. To stay silent requires control. To stay silent requires trust in your own worth. And to stay silent requires a kind of courage most people do not possess. Silence is not disappearance. It is presence on a deeper level. When you stop speaking, you begin to observe. When you stop explaining, you begin to see the essence. When you stop forcing your way in, you begin to sense the real movement of the world around you. Silence frees you from being trapped inside other people's dramas and allows you to step outside, to see the play clearly, with every character and role exposed. From that distance, you gain a clarity that noise can never provide. Ask yourself this: how many times have you tried to explain yourself only to end up lost in endless arguments? How many times did you think staying quiet would make you lose, but in your silence the other person pulled back? How many times did you realize that words only added fuel to the fire, while silence put it out? So if you don't speak, yet others still listen, what is really happening? It is not a flaw. It is power that doesn't need to be announced. Silence carries a form of authority that doesn't demand or fight, yet makes others shift their behavior. People can argue against your words, they can reject your logic. But it is hard to resist silence. When you don't react, others are forced to confront themselves. When you don't rush, they are left uneasy. When you stay still, they realize their own movements may be meaningless. The noisier the world, the more silence becomes like a mirror. It reflects what noise cannot hide. It makes others face themselves. And often it is in that moment they feel your presence more strongly than any speech. You don't need to shout. You don't need to compete. Through stillness alone, you can shift the rhythm of an entire room. This is the hidden power people rarely talk about. We are taught how to speak, how to persuade, how to argue. Few are ever taught how to be silent. Because silence cannot be learned through technique. It is the outcome of true inner confidence. It is proof that you no longer depend on external validation. And once you discover this power, you begin to see that silence often travels farther than any voice. To understand why silence holds such force and how to turn it into an anchor in your life, you must begin with the first step, the step of returning to yourself. Returning to yourself. For generations, society has quietly programmed women to live for others. From childhood, they are taught to be obedient to please their parents. As adults, they are expected to become devoted wives, selfless mothers, and accommodating colleagues. Praise often comes only when they give more, endure more, or sacrifice more. And in that process, many gradually lose the ability to turn inward and see themselves. This feeling is so familiar that almost everyone has experienced it. exhausted after a long day, yet still forcing a smile to keep others comfortable, always ready to listen, but rarely truly listened to, chasing the expectations of family, work, and society, only to realize when lying down at night that you never once asked yourself, "What do I really need today?" The harder you try to please everyone, the bigger the emptiness inside grows, like a vessel that keeps pouring out but is never refilled. When your attention is constantly scattered outward, your personal energy drains quickly. You can work endlessly, care for everyone, explain yourself in every situation, yet still end up feeling hollow and depleted. Because inner energy is not infinite. It is like a stream. If it flows outward without pause, without moments of stillness to gather strength, the stream dries up and the fields around it wither. The philosophy behind this is clear. Attention is the most valuable form of mental currency. Where you spend it determines the quality of your inner life. If you pour it entirely into meeting other people's needs, you will have nothing left for yourself. But if you learn to hold it back, to invest in yourself, you will discover freedom. True freedom is not about abandoning responsibility. It is about refusing to be defined completely by the emotions and demands of others. Turning inward is the act of affirming your worth. It is like stepping out of a noisy room into a quiet space, where you can finally hear your own heartbeat. When you dare to pause the endless chase for external approval, you begin to see that you still carry a rich world within. A world of desires, intuition, and authentic identity. And when you nurture that world, you no longer beg for recognition, because your value is rooted in your own being. Yet this return is not always easy. Around you, the voices of demand and expectation may still be loud. Within you, habits built over years remain the habit of sacrifice, the habit of proving yourself, the fear of being abandoned if you stop pleasing others. That is why returning is only the beginning. To sustain it, to transform it into a steady foundation, one more element is required: the discipline of silence. The discipline of silence. Silence exists in two very different forms, and the distinction between them creates two completely opposite paths. One form of silence is born from fear. It is the silence when you dare not speak, when you fear rejection, fear judgment, fear that your voice carries no worth. This silence makes you shrink back, lose your true presence, and allow others to impose their will on you. It is the silence of suppression, of resignation, and eventually of self-denial. But there is another form of silence. This one comes from self-mastery. It is not avoidance but choice. It is not fear but control. It does not make you weak. It makes you steady. Because you know your value does not need to be proven by constant words. In daily life, everyone has faced the familiar situation. The more you explain, the less you are respected. The clearer you try to be, the less they want to hear. The more you defend yourself, the more you seem to be justifying. Yet when you choose silence, the atmosphere suddenly shifts. The other person is forced to reflect, to confront their own words. Respect arrives not because you argued better, but because you showed that your presence doesn't depend on endless explanations. This is the quiet power most people never learn to use. The philosophy within this is clear. Silence is an unspoken boundary. It is like an invisible wall that protects you from the spiral of endless arguments. Words can become double-edged swords that cut you as much as others. But silence acts as a shield. It breaks the cycle of escalation, keeping you grounded in the center rather than being swept away. In silence, You are not dragged along by someone else's emotions. In silence, you see the truth more clearly, not the illusions born of heated reactions. This is not only philosophy, but also science. When you are silent, your body shifts out of the fight or flight response. In that state of conflict, the heart races, muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, and thought narrows. Every reaction is reduced to survival, and clear thinking is lost. But silence activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Your heart slows, your breath deepens, your muscles release. In this balance, you are no longer ruled by waves of emotion, but able to think with clarity and respond with wisdom. Silence is not just a mental state. It is also a biological reset that restores your natural calm. This explains why so many regret their words after arguments. They said things they never meant, only because their nervous system was hijacked by tension. A brief pause of silence could have changed everything. Just a few seconds of stillness is often enough for the body to regain balance, for the mind to clear. One small moment of silence can save you from long-lasting wounds. The discipline of silence is not about suppressing word, it is about conscious choice. It requires knowing when words matter and when silence speaks louder. It does not isolate you. It deepens your presence. It allows you to preserve your energy, to stop pouring it into empty debates. And through that restraint, you take back authorship of yourself, rather than becoming a reaction shaped by others. Think back to the arguments that drained you. Did you truly gain understanding, or only fatigue? Now recall the times you stayed silent and watched how the storm faded on its own. The problem did not vanish. It simply stopped growing because you refused to feed it. That is the difference between being controlled and being in control. To make silence a discipline requires practice. The habit of instant reaction runs deep. You must train yourself to pause, to breathe, to observe, and then to choose silence intentionally. At first, this feels difficult. You will feel the urge to argue, to prove, to react, but gradually you learn to take one step back. In that step back, a space opens for wisdom to arise. When silence becomes discipline, a new strength appears. You no longer depend on external reactions. You no longer waste yourself in endless explanations. You no longer need recognition to validate your presence. Instead, you stand firm in quiet and let your being speak louder than any words. This is not coldness, it is the power of self-mastery. And from this discipline, a new doorway opens. For silence does not stop at setting boundaries with others. It lays the foundation for a deeper state still, the state of emotional sovereignty. Emotional sovereignty. One of the greatest losses a person can suffer is allowing their emotions to be controlled by others. When someone becomes angry, you immediately explode in return. When someone withdraws into silence, you are consumed with anxiety. When someone criticizes you, you spend sleepless nights trying to prove your worth. In those moments, you have handed over the authority of your inner world, becoming like a small boat pushed in every direction by the wind, without a rudder of your own. This experience is painfully familiar. You argue with a loved one, say cruel words you don't mean, and later cry in regret. You lose control at a harsh comment, lash out in anger, and when the rage fades, you realize you have only hurt yourself. Or perhaps you are shaken to tears by a careless remark, and days later, you still cannot escape the weight of it. Each of these moments reveals the same truth: you were not in charge of your emotions. You were only reacting. The philosophy of emotional sovereignty lies in a subtle but powerful distance, the space between feeling and reaction. Emotions may rise like fire, but you still have the choice to contain them or let them burn out of control. In the very instant you learn to pause, to observe your feelings rather than obey them blindly, you step into true freedom. Freedom does not mean being numb. It means refusing to let emotions dictate your actions. The emotionally sovereign person is not cold or detached. On the contrary, they feel deeply, but they remain clear. They know when anger rises, but they do not let it turn into destruction. They know when sadness pulls them down, but they do not allow it to drown them. They know love can make them tender, but they do not let it become blind dependency. This clarity creates an unmistakable strength. The one who masters themselves does not need to control others, and because of this, no one can easily manipulate them. Practicing emotional sovereignty begins with small moments. When criticism is thrown at you, the urge to defend yourself may flare instantly. But if you pause, take one slow breath, you realize you have a choice. You can choose silence. You can choose to respond calmly. You can choose to walk away to protect your peace. Every such choice is a workout for the inner muscle of self-mastery. Many believe that emotional sovereignty makes them appear distant, as though building a wall around their hearts. But this is a misunderstanding. Sovereignty does not shut down emotions. It refines them. It adds a filter so that you are no longer swept away blindly. The sovereign individual still loves and still feels anger, still experiences sadness, and still enjoys happiness, but they love without losing themselves. They get angry without destroying. They grieve without falling into despair. They rejoice without clinging. This balance is the foundation of a resilient and peaceful life. Think back to the times you lost control. What followed, was it not exhaustion, regret, and scars left behind in your heart? Now remember the times you stayed calm, refusing to let another's words pierce your peace. In those moments, didn't you feel stronger, clearer, freer? The difference between those two experiences is the clearest proof of the power of emotional sovereignty. The sovereign does not allow the outer world to dictate the inner world. They understand that storms will always exist, but they refuse to let their soul drift like a rudderless boat. They are the captain. They decide the direction, when to sail and when to anchor, and no one else steers that wheel. In this steadiness, they discover a quiet confidence that does not need to be shown because it radiates naturally. Emotional sovereignty is not achieved in a single day. It is a long journey that demands practice. Each day, situations will test your patience, your calm, and your sense of dignity. Each time you preserve your peace instead of reacting impulsively, you advance along this path, and with consistent practice, you will feel freedom expand into every part of your life. When sovereignty becomes your nature, it does more than transform your inner world. It begins to radiate outward. Others sense your grounded energy. They treat you with respect because they know you cannot be shaken easily. And from this inner steadiness, you naturally step into the next stage, the power of presence. Presence in silence. There is a truth most people overlook. The body and the eyes reveal the inner world faster than any words ever could. You can say you are fine, that you are confident, that you are not afraid, but averted eyes, hunched shoulders, and trembling hands tell another story. Others may not consciously analyze it, but they feel it. Within seconds, they sense whether you are truly grounded or not. This experience is familiar to many. You voice a correct idea in a meeting, yet no one pays attention. Later, Someone else says the same thing and receives recognition. Why? Because when you spoke, your eyes lacked certainty, your voice wavered, your posture leaned inward. The message you sent was not the strength of your reasoning, but the absence of trust in yourself. And so your words, though correct, carried little weight. On the other hand, some people only need to walk into a room, and without saying anything, all eyes turn toward them, and they don't need noise. Their presence alone shifts the atmosphere. The philosophy behind this is profound. Each person carries what can be called an energy signature, a unique frequency that others sense before you speak. You can disguise things with words, but energy cannot be hidden. It shows through your breath, your stance, your gaze. If your inner world is unstable, your body will betray you. If your inner world is steady, that certainty radiates outward, and others receive it as undeniable truth. Here lies the essential lesson. When your inner world is firm, you do not need to shout to be heard. Your silence is enough. The silence of the insecure feels like disappearance, but the silence of the grounded becomes magnetic. It compels others to pause, to wait, to pay attention. A steady gaze, an upright posture, a calm breath, these become a language more powerful than any words. Think back to the times you entered a room full of strangers. If you carried worry inside, you felt invisible, easily overlooked. But if you entered with calm eyes, steady steps, and an air of ease, you saw the difference instantly. Others felt that energy, and they responded with attention, sometimes even with respect, not because you tried to impress them, but because you were truly present. Presence in silence works like an invisible wave. It makes no sound, yet everyone who encounters it feels it. This is why those who master themselves carry a quiet magnetism. They don't need to force impression. They only need to be. Presence itself is the proof of their inner strength. If you want to change how the world perceives you, begin by changing how you show up. Do not focus only on the words you speak. Observe the way you sit, the way you breathe, the way you hold your gaze. Do not chase approval. Hold your ground within every glance. Once you are stable inside, others will naturally sense it. As your presence shifts, the way others treat you shifts as well. They no longer dismiss you because they sense a clarity they cannot deny. They no longer interrupt because your silence compels them to wait. They no longer impose as easily because your steadiness makes them cautious. This is not a surface skill. It is the result of an inner life that has been trained. And from this personal presence, a new door opens. Because the world does more than react to you, it reflects what you carry inside. When you are anxious, life will send you situations that feed your worry. When you are steady, life will present people and opportunities that reflect that steadiness back to you. From presence in silence, we naturally move toward the deeper truth, the mirror effect in relationships. The mirror effect in relationships. People often believe that the relationships they encounter are a matter of chance. We think that repeating the same kind of people, the same kind of situations, is just an unfortunate twist of fate. But if you look deeper, you will see that nothing is random. We attract exactly what reflects the state of our inner world, like an echo in a room. What we carry inside is amplified and returned to us by the outer world. This experience is deeply familiar. Some people repeatedly find themselves in relationships where they feel undervalued, whether in friendship or in love. Others constantly meet partners who control, exploit, or abandon them at the moment they need support most. We assume it is bad luck, but in truth, It is the energy inside us that broadcasts a signal to which the world responds. These repetitions are not coincidences. They are signs that we have not yet shifted our inner frequency. Jung's philosophy explains this clearly. The outer world is a mirror of the inner world. If you are insecure, you will attract those who make your insecurity louder. If you lack trust, you will encounter people who betray or withdraw. If you carry within you the fear of abandonment, you will repeatedly enter relationships that seem to confirm that fear. Not because you deserve it, but because the frequency you emit acts as an invitation to those experiences. Think back to the relationships you have repeated in your own life. Each time, did they not touch the exact wound you had not yet healed? Did you not find yourself falling into the same cycle, only with different names, different faces, and different settings? This is the mirror effect. Others unknowingly play the role of reflecting the parts of yourself you have not faced. And because your inner world remains unchanged, you continue to draw the same story back to you. The essential lesson here is this. If you want to change your relationships, you must first change yourself. Do not only look at the other person and blame them. Do not wait for others to treat you differently. If your energy remains the same, if your beliefs remain unchanged, you will repeat the same experience again and again. True change begins when you shift your inner frequency. When you grow stronger within, you naturally attract healthier connections. When you begin to respect yourself, you will find the world reflecting that respect back to you. This is not easy because it demands that you face yourself. You must confront your fears, your emptiness, and the false beliefs you have carried for years. But the courage to face them is the first step to breaking the cycle. Once you transform your inner world, you stop sending out the same old signals, and the old patterns lose their grip. The outer world always functions as an honest mirror. It does not show you what you want. It shows you what you are. If you want a different reflection, you cannot break the mirror. You must change the expression on your own face. And in the same way, if you want better relationships, you must begin by reshaping your own heart and mind. And sometimes, this change does not come from doing more, saying more, or trying harder. It comes from stopping. From stepping back at the right time so you do not continue to feed the old cycle. It is in this act of withdrawal that you create the chance to reset your energy. And in doing so, you allow the world to reflect back a new image of who you are. This is where we arrive at a deeper lesson, the art of strategic withdrawal. The art of strategic withdrawal. One of the main reasons people remain trapped in unhealthy relationships is because they cling to the potential of another person rather than facing reality. We see who they could become: a kinder partner, a more loving companion, a stronger ally. We convince ourselves that if we try a little harder, love a little more, explain one more time, then they will change. But in truth, what we are holding on to is not the real person before us. It is only the image we have built in our imagination. This experience is painfully familiar. You may have poured all your energy into holding on to a relationship, hoping patience would be rewarded. You may have explained yourself over and over, only to remain unheard. You may have given more than you had to give, yet received only silence or indifference in return. And in the end, you were left drained because your efforts were never reciprocated. This is the cycle of clinging to potential instead of facing reality. The philosophy of strategic withdrawal rests here. Withdrawal is not running away, and it is not failure. It is the act of reclaiming freedom for yourself. When you step back, You take back control of your energy. You reclaim the space to breathe, to see clearly. You stop trapping yourself in the game of empty expectation. You step out of the chessboard where you were once a piece in play, and from that distance, you begin to see the whole board, to understand that you were never obligated to keep playing. The lesson is profound. Distance reveals truth. When you are too close, your vision is clouded by emotion, by habit, by the hopes that blind you. But when you create space, the reality stands uncovered. The real person emerges, no longer wrapped in the illusion of potential. Actions speak louder than promises, and from afar, those actions become undeniable. Sometimes stepping back gives you the answer that thousands of explanations could not. Strategic withdrawal is a form of discipline. It does not come from anger or revenge. It is not meant to punish or make the other person suffer. It comes from clarity, the clarity that you cannot keep draining yourself in a relationship that no longer offers balance. It is the choice to protect your inner worth. When you step away, you grant yourself the right to live truthfully, instead of confining yourself in illusion. Many fear withdrawal because they believe it means losing someone forever. But the truth is this: if a relationship exists only because you are clinging to it at all costs, then it was never truly yours. Withdrawal does not make you lose someone. It only reveals who was never really there to begin with. And though that truth may hurt, it is the clarity that prevents you from wasting your life further. There is also a paradox. Strategic withdrawal often produces the opposite effect. When you stop explaining, when you stop chasing, when you stop filling the silence, the other person is forced to face the emptiness you once covered. That emptiness speaks for you. It reveals your value more clearly because your presence is no longer taken for granted. Whether they change or they walk away, you have already won because you chose freedom. Think about it. How many times did you only see someone's true nature once you were no longer close to them? How often did clarity come not in their presence, but in their absence? That is the power of strategic withdrawal. It is like standing too close to a painting. All you see is a blur of colors. But when you step back, the entire picture comes into focus. Withdrawal is not an ending. It is a transformation. It is not about shutting doors, but about opening space. Space for healing, space for awareness, space for growth. Most importantly, space to reconnect with yourself instead of chasing someone else. When you learn to withdraw at the right moment, you step into the highest meaning. Transformation. Because only when you release what binds you can you experience inner freedom. Only when you stop chasing illusions can you see reality clearly. And only when you dare to pause can you begin a new journey where silence is no longer an escape, but the foundation for a completely different way of living. Transformation in silence. At a certain point, silence is no longer just a skill you use selectively in specific situations. It becomes a way of being, a natural state that shapes how you think, how you show up, and how you move through the world. In the beginning, silence might feel like a tool to avoid unnecessary conflict, but as you grow, it becomes like breathing an unshakable rhythm present in every moment. Those who reach this stage no longer need to remind themselves stay silent, because stillness has already become part of who they are. The journey toward this transformation closes as a complete circle. It begins with turning inward, realizing that your energy cannot forever be drained for others. From there, you build the discipline of silence, refusing to be pulled into endless arguments, choosing to pause instead of reacting. That discipline grows into emotional sovereignty, no longer being dragged by external moods, but becoming the one who chooses how to respond. From this sovereignty flows a powerful presence, felt even before you speak. As your presence becomes clear, the world mirrors your inner state back to you, forcing you to face the beliefs and wounds you carry. And if you have the courage, you learn strategic withdrawal, stepping back, letting distance reveal truth, instead of clinging to illusions. All these steps lead you to the final stage, transformation through silence. In this transformation, silence becomes the doorway to a new way of living. It is no longer a temporary strategy, but a natural foundation, a rhythm of peace woven into daily life. Those who arrive here do not vanish into silence. On the contrary, they become clearer than ever. In a noisy world, a person can easily be drowned out among countless voices. But in silence, they stand out because their steadiness speaks without needing words. Here lies the greatest lesson. Silence does not make you smaller, it makes you sharper, more defined. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to prove your worth to be valued. You don't need to chase approval for the world to recognize your presence. When silence becomes a way of being, you no longer depend on external validation, because you already carry validation within yourself. This transformation also reshapes how you see life. Once you may have believed respect came from winning arguments, that value came from holding on to relationships, that visibility came from saying more. But after walking the path of silence, you see that strength does not come from noise. It comes from inner stability. The one who can remain steady in silence holds a power that noise can never match. This does not mean cutting off emotions or separating yourself from the world. On the contrary, it means feeling even more deeply. But instead of being consumed by every wave, you learn to observe. Instead of letting storms define you, you let your inner ground anchor you. And in that anchor, you discover freedom. Freedom from arguments, freedom from dependency, freedom from the cycle of proving and clinging. Picture this. Silence is like the surface of a lake. When it is disturbed, all you see are ripples, distortions, and confusion. But when it is still, you can see the sky, your reflection, and everything around it clearly. Only in stillness do you truly perceive reality. And so the final question comes to each of us when the storm rises again. Will you let it sweep you away, or will you stand firm in the silence of your own being? Your answer defines who you are. It determines whether you remain a drifting leaf or become a rooted tree. If these words have reached you, then stay with this journey, because this is only the beginning. There are deeper truths waiting to be uncovered. There is more hidden strength in silence waiting to be awakened. And there are lessons ahead that will help you not only withstand the storm, but also grow stronger within it. This is not an ending. This is the opening of a new path, one where every step brings you closer to true freedom.